Hey, friends, welcome to another episode of Not Your Mama's podcast. I am your host, Cristina Francy. And today, the title of this episode is How to Communicate Effectively in Your Relationship. In this episode, we are speaking with Rachel Elder, who is a couples therapist and relationships coach, helping career driven women create passionate relationships with their partners. She is a mom to two. She's a mom to a 2-year-old, wife, and a fellow entrepreneur, and a lover of iced mochas and The Office. I love it. Welcome to the podcast, Rachel. It's such an honor to have you on. Can you give the audience a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah. So I have always been fascinated by relationships. I was definitely the friend in high school who was trying to match make, was a hopeless romantic, loved all the J-Lo movies, wanted my own love, and then decided to go to college, pursued a degree in psychology. Once you graduate with that, it's either you get your master's or you kind of just figure out if there's anything you can do with it. So I took the master's route, went and did 4 more years of schooling, and took every class I could when it came to relationships and those patterns and dynamics. Took a little bit of a different path when I started, worked with adolescents. Then I worked with gifted individuals and then found myself circling back of I need to work with couples. I need to work with relationships. I love this work. And finally decided after I took a maternity leave to come back and open my own therapy practice in Washington State, working with couples. And that has now translated into doing relationship coaching as well,
Mhm.
because I love the work and I love helping people go from a place where they're thinking we're going to make it or break it, or I just have to accept this is how my relationship's going to be for the rest of my life, and helping
Mhm.
them see that they can change, they can grow, and they can actually become stronger together by
Mhm.
giving them really helpful skills and tools, which often revolve around our communication, how we manage conflict, and how we build connection together.
Yeah, well, communication is extremely important. And I love it. You're like the savior, like you come in, you swoop in, and you help save the relationship. I love it. And I totally feel you on the JLo movies. I love all the JLo movies.
I just watched her Homecoming show on Netflix, and I was like, I don't know if we're allowed to swear. She's a badass. I'm like,
I
I want to
know.
be J Lo in my
I know.
life.
I was like, every JLo movie, I'm like, God, I wish I had that life. Like whatever character she's playing, she's good at picking out like relatable, good characters. And I feel like she plays them so well. So I
So
totally
good.
feel you with that. So, how can we increase communication in our marriages?
hmm I always like to joke, well, you have to start talking. But it really can be that simple. Communication requires speaking, using your voice and turning towards your partner, your husband, your wife, and telling them what's going on. Whatever your needs are, whatever your desires, your dreams, your hopes are, communication requires talking first.
Mm-hmm.
So that is the first step, starting to actually put words to what's going on in our lives. But I think a piece that happens with our communication is we sometimes find ourselves communicating just about kind of the to-do list, communicating about things that we aren't enjoying, that we don't like, that we want to stop. So we find that our communication kind of goes down a negative spiral or a negative cycle.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we stop talking, or that's why we stop turning to our partner for our needs and what's going on. So I always like to tell people to first start talking, but start talking about what you want to add to your relationship or what
Yeah.
you're needing. And the more of the positive need or the positive change you want in life, it's really easy for us to identify what we don't want anymore, what we don't want to repeat. It's a little bit harder for us to talk about like what's the transformation of that or what's the opposite of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I always joke about it's funny, I don't actually have this challenge in my relationship, but it's my go to example of when you tell your partner you want them to stop leaving the towels on the floor in the bathroom. What's the opposite of that? What does the towels not being on the floor do for you in your relationship? So maybe it gives you peace. Maybe it helps you feel organized, makes you feel put together.
Yeah.
So instead of harping on the towels being on the floor, asking your partner and communicating with them that it means a lot to me when the bathroom feels put in place. The towels on the floor, for some reason, create stress for me. May not create stress for you, but it does for me. And I feel peace when they're hung up or they're put in the laundry basket after we're done using them.
Mm-hmm.
Can you help me feel more peace in my life by remembering to put the towels up?
Mm-hmm.
Way different way of communicating versus nagging, focusing on the negative,
Yeah.
or just all the things that are going wrong in your
Yeah. Like you
relationship.
never do it. And,
Hmm.
you're lazy,
Yep.
yeah. I mean, it's rewording. And how do you help someone recognize, like, what are some tools that you can that you would give a partner? Let's say they do like berate their partner for leaving the towels on the ground. How can you help them work through and communicate, like the example you gave, like, hey, this makes me feel, disorganized in the house. Like, can you please do this? Like, how do you help someone switch that? Because it's hard. You can't teach an old dog new tricks sometimes,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah. I have kind of two ways. The first way is by creating more appreciation, admiration, and affirmation in your relationship. So, this is creating more positivity. To do that, you have to be able to come up with things each day that you can appreciate, admire, or affirm. Sometimes this is
Mm-hmm.
where gratitude practices come into play, but focusing on that with your partner. So, at the end of every day, saying, what are three things that I can appreciate, admire, or affirm about how my partner has been my partner today or how they added to my life in a good way.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the research and psychology on relationships is that people do what we call negative sentiment override, which is just starting to see all that's going wrong, all the negative. They start to doubt that their husband, their wife has good intentions for them, and they instantly think there's a negative intention. So that leads to that negative override. And that's the way that we view our relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's going wrong, nothing's going right. My partner doesn't want to connect with me. They don't want to communicate with me. They don't care what I need or how I feel. A way to shift out of that is to build a positive perspective, which is to start to practice that gratitude,
Mm-hmm.
acknowledging what are the ways that my partner is adding to my life. Way easier said than done.
Totally.
But any gratitude practice, the more that you stay with it and you focus on it, your brain rewires and you start to see good. You
Mm-hmm.
start to see less of what's going wrong or what you dislike. And you start to be able to communicate those things that need to change in a healthier way that your partner actually wants to change with you versus getting defensive because they feel criticized.
Totally.
So that's the first way. And then a little bit more like simplified, just communication framework is to start with I appreciate fill in the blank. I appreciate you putting the dishes away. I'm feeling so overwhelmed by the bathroom and how chaotic it feels. I need help picking it up. Can you help me? So
Mm-hmm.
it's I appreciate, I feel, I need. Most of the time, when we start with that positive language, our partner's going to tune in. They're going to
Yeah.
listen to us. They're going to feel less criticized and they're actually going to want to support you. It doesn't always play out perfectly, but it's a different way versus saying you left the towels on the floor again, pick them up.
Yeah.
It's going to communicate a need in a healthier way and allow your partner to actually support you versus be annoyed or frustrated or angry with you.
Yeah. No, that's really great. We gotta, it like you said, it is so much easier said than done,
Hmm.
because I always feel like negative energy flows faster than positive energy. Like it's a
Hmm.
lot harder to like rev up that positive thoughts and the positive energy because it's so much easier to look at the negative.
Yep.
And it's destructive. And you're right. Like once you start looking at one negative thing, you start looking at all the negative things and you're picking at everything out, and hard to change your mind back to the
Hmm.
positive once that energy, the negative energy starts flowing. So
Yeah.
I think it's really important that people do take the time to like write down like things that you're grateful for in the relationship. Like at least, do like a 21-day practice. Like try to do it every morning, like when you wake up and be like, I'm grateful that my wife is taking care of my children.
Hmm.
I am grateful that my wife feeds me or whatever
Yeah.
it is. You know what I mean? It's whatever's to you, but you know, it's life changing
Mhm.
when you can look at the glass half full instead of half empty.
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast and
Mhm.
Mel Robbins was speaking on it. And I wrote down a comment she said, because she said, gratitude is not about changing the other person, it's about changing yourself.
Exactly.
Gratitude doesn't change your life, it changes how you show up in your life. And I just thought that was so incredible because that's the goal with it is that you having appreciation for your partner doesn't change them, doesn't change your relationship. It changes how you engage in your relationship and how you show up in it.
Yeah,
And
your
so that is the
perspective.
power of it.
Totally, I agree. Mel Robbins, I love. I did like she had this like high five challenge. I think it was like
Mhm.
last year or the beginning of this year, I forget. And
Yeah.
then you have to look at yourself in the mirror and like give yourself a high five, you know?
Mhm.
And some people really do have a hard time giving themselves a high five, you know?
Yeah.
Like when you really sit there and you look at yourself, like what do you see, you know? And it is working on yourself. And it's like if you're not happy with yourself in the inside, no one else is going to make you happy,
Yep.
you know? So it's a great way to like first you got to look inside. What are my paradigms? What are the things that are affecting me in my life? And how can I shift that? Because when I shift that perspective, how I see people on the outside towards me is going to shift,
Yep.
you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, I love that you brought up Mel Robbins because it reminded me of the high five challenge, you know? And like at the end of it, I was like, high five, you know? I
Yeah.
was like, you got it, girl.
Yeah. It is powerful though. I know everyone does like gratitude challenges in November, the thankful month, but there is research and science that backs how impactful it is. So if you can have gratitude towards yourself, how do you then show up in your relationships? If you can have gratitude towards others, how does that keep that ripple effect going? And it is really
Mhm.
powerful. I have my couples I work with sometimes be a little annoyed or uncomfortable when I walk them through this exercise, but usually when they come back a few weeks later, they're like, "Yeah, it's made a huge difference and it's easier for me to communicate my needs or tell my partner how I'm feeling. And I actually believe they care. I
Yeah.
actually believe they want to help me. And I didn't feel that way a few weeks ago."
Mhm.
So it's one of those tangible action steps we can do, even if it feels cliche, cheesy, overused. It's overused for a reason because it actually works.
Yeah. It's all about delivery and presentation
Yes.
and being mindful about that. No,
Yeah.
that's really great advice. So my second question is how do we, maintaining a marriage as a business owner? How do we help keep our relationships intact while, we're going after our dreams and goals? What advice can you give about that?
Mhm. This is probably more from my own experience, but I've heard it echoed with other people too, is that whether you're a business owner, you're career driven, or you just have big goals for yourself, what I learned from my own experience and talking to others is that we know what those goals are and we pursue them. And we sometimes forget to tell our partners, our
Yeah.
husbands, our wives, whoever's supporting us, we forget to tell them what we're pursuing and what we're going after. And so that then produces maybe some frustration, some conflict. You feel a lack of support because the other party doesn't understand what you're doing. So bringing back that communication, I think as you pursue anything in your life, you have to make sure that the people that you want going there with you are in the loop,
Yeah.
which requires telling them. So I'm trying to think like when I decided I was going to add coaching into my business, when I did my first launch, I knew my husband knew about it, but he thought the launch was the website that I created. And then I did like a master class and I was so disappointed when he came home and he didn't ask me about it. And
Yeah.
I got very emotional and was like, "Do you understand what today was for me?" And he was like, is this a trick question?" Like he had no idea. And I was so upset. And he was like, "You didn't tell me." And I was like, "Wait a minute, I've been talking about it." He's like, "I literally thought that it was the website was the launch. I didn't realize there was all these layers and these steps. Like you've been doing this, but
Hmm.
you've never really had a conversation with me about it. You just kind of told me what you're doing." And I was like, "Oh gosh, here I am teaching relationship skills and I'm not modeling all of them so well." So I think it's sitting down and talking to the person you want up there with you as you move towards these goals and letting them know why it's important to you, what
Hmm.
it's going to take, what are the steps, what it looks like for them to support you, what you're needing in that, and be open to hearing their thoughts on it too.
Mm-hmm.
Especially those who are driven and ambitious. You typically go after a lot in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And mm, sometimes you're married to someone similar, but most of the time you're not. We tend to marry and date people who are opposite to us. And so they may not understand the desire to go after all those things.
Yeah.
So you have to sit down and talk about it, explain why it's important, and then also hear their thoughts, because you going after these things, it does impact them. Every time
Totally.
I pursue something in my business, it impacts my relationship, whether it's pulling time away from it or having a push period of time. So I'm not as engaged in my relationship as I'd like to be.
Mm-hmm.
So having that conversation first and being open to how do we create this together versus it just being you on your own going after it and hoping that your partner is on board for all of it.
What if your
So,
partner's not on board? Like,
mm,
what do you do then? Like, you have all these dreams and ambitions, and like they kind of dismiss it and kind of think it's, a pipe dream. Like,
yeah.
like, and then that doesn't make you feel safe to open up about what you want to do. And then you kind of like are closed in and you're kind of doing it on your own. Like what would you give advice to, like, let's say someone like that?
Yeah. So I think this is where curiosity is a really powerful tool of being curious of, so why are you against this? Or what makes you not supportive of me going after this?
Mm-hmm.
Part of it probably means there's more dialogue that needs to happen. Maybe there's a fear. Maybe there's still not an understanding from your partner's perspective of why this is important to you. You feel like you've explained it, but to them, it's just sounds like something fun to do, and they don't understand why you'd invest time, money, and energy into it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's very normal for us in our relationships to have what I call the here we go again, or kind of gridlock conversations where there's not a clear solution. You have your own solution, your partner has their own solution, but they're not in alignment. So you have to keep sitting down and talking about it. So that would be the first piece. And then I'd be wondering if there's ability to compromise. Um, so I'm thinking about like when I pursued, I was doing beach body coaching for maybe a year or
I
two.
love Beachbody.
Yeah.
I love Beachbody.
Yeah. I'm not cut out for the coach side, which is totally fine, but I love
Yeah,
all the
me either.
workouts.
I just want to do the workouts.
Yeah. But when I started, I was like, I'm going to coach. And my husband was like, I don't know why you're doing that. And I was like, well, I don't need you to know why. Right. Like I kind of dug my heel in the sand of like, I'm going to do whatever I want. I'm an independent woman.
Yeah, dude, I
um,
the same story right there for me
yeah.
and you. I'm in alignment. I see you.
Yeah. Um, but what happened is I would resent him for not supporting me, but I never really told him why it was important to me. And really, it was just for the experience.
Yeah.
There was the potential for financial abundance from it, but it was making a difference in my health and my
Mhm.
life. It was making a difference of how I showed up in my relationship with him. And so I wish I would have slowed down and been able to understand why he was resistant, what his hesitations were, what was his mindset about it. Because I didn't need him to have the same mindset as me, but I did need to know that he was going to allow me to pursue something, even if it wasn't his dream or goal.
Yeah.
And so sometimes we just have to be willing to have conversations over and over again. And in my work, I know couples don't like to do that. They're like, I just want to be one and done with this conversation.
Yeah.
It's not a big deal. But you're different personalities, you have different backgrounds, different upbringings that are showing up in these conversations that you don't always see it happening. There's a
Yeah.
lot of the unconscious behind the scenes work. So being able to sit down and say, okay, you don't want me to do this. I want to do this. Is there a compromise here? Do we need to have more conversation to understand why this, how we each feel and why this is important to each of us? And be willing to have more than one conversation. I know for me, I come into the conversation like prepared that he's going to say no. And so then I dig my heel in the sand even harder versus giving him the opportunity to share openly his thoughts and
Mhm.
feelings without me already having a judgment on what
Yeah.
he will say. So a lot of it, I mean, the theme of communication, it just comes down to communicating. and being open and to keep having the conversation. You might need to have it 50 times until you have that compromise or you have the understanding from each other's perspective and you've identified what you truly need. I didn't need him to be involved in Beachbody. I just needed his support. Even
Exactly.
if that was just saying like, how's your workout going? That's what I needed. I didn't need him to be bought into the process. I didn't need him to be as gung ho about it as I was. I
You
just
didn't
needed
need a
him.
subscription
Yeah.
to Shakeology.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
funny.
So it's really just coming back down to your needs and communicating that with your partner. And sometimes we don't know what our needs are. We just jump into a conversation of saying, I want this. Okay, that's
Yeah.
great. But we
Hmm.
don't always get what we want in life. So can you move into why this is a need, why it's important to you, why it matters to you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what is something, how can we change our relationships for the better?
Mhm. That's a big question. I think it's slowing things down. What I see in my work is that people are coming in with communication issues, conflict management issues, and connection issues. So to truly change your relationship, you need to figure out what needs to change first. And that means slowing down for yourself and saying, how am I feeling? What is it that I'm desiring? And getting really clear on that.
Yeah.
A lot of people just say something's wrong, so let's read this book. Let's do this workshop. Let's do this. But they haven't actually done the work to identify what the problem is and what they need to spend time on. They're
Yeah.
just kind of throwing the darts, hoping it hits home, and they're just missing. So I think the first part is just knowing what are you needing and what is your partner needing? What do you
Hmm.
both need to have the relationship that you're desiring and wanting for yourself? And
Totally.
then communicating that, but also taking ownership of your part. So, also in my office, I see a lot of couples saying, I'll do this if you do this first. But change comes from each person choosing to change, not by demanding it of the other person. That's what we call those ultimatums, and they don't typically go very well. Sometimes they do, thanks to that Netflix show. um, but most of the time, they don't go very well. So, when we're talking about change, identifying what you need and then saying, what am I willing to take ownership of and step into changing? So, if you need your partner to communicate how they're feeling more with you,
Hmm.
what are you doing then to allow them to communicate more with you about how they're feeling? Are you being curious? Are you inviting them into conversations with you? Are you expressing why it's important to you to hear how they're feeling?
Hmm.
Really identifying for yourself, I'm going to take ownership of this. This is what I'm going to do to change the relationship for the better. And then inviting your partner to do the same.
Yeah.
I see a lot of times people are just demanding their partner do something,
Yeah.
which it can work sometimes, but it's really not the
Most
healthy
of the
way.
time, not. You got to be
Yeah.
strategic,
Yeah.
about it. You got to methodically think how you're going to present it and present it in a way that's going to be received.
Hmm.
It's not just blah,
Yeah.
you got to really think about it and like really know truly what it is that you want and why you want it and how it's going to make you feel.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, that is all great advice. I could talk to you forever about all this stuff. Honestly, I'd love to have you on again.
Yeah, I'd love
Um,
to.
but I do have 4 questions that I ask all my guests, um, all my first time guests. And my first question to you is who and what inspires you?
I always say other like all the women. I feel so inspired watching other people pursue their dreams, especially women. I
Mhm.
mean, men are great, but I'm biased. I'm a female, and we tend to do so much goodness with what we go after in our
Mhm.
world. And I know men do as well, but I've just done so much reading and so much research about women who are empowered, women who make change in the world, and how they give so much back to the
Mhm.
community. So women in general, I mean, I love watching J-Lo's documentary last night. Like I feel very inspired
You're
by
like, I
her.
am empowered.
I am empowered by her. But I will also say my little one. Yeah, I wanted a little girl so bad, and we got a little girl. And getting to watch her grow and develop and see her personality makes me want to break any glass ceilings and show her that whatever she desires in her life is possible as long as she has that grit and determination and drive. And so she inspires me almost daily too, to keep recircling of like, what am I doing in my life? Why does it matter? What's the impact it has? And how will it benefit her long term as well?
Perfect. No, that's beautiful. So my second question is, what is something you wished you knew when you were younger?
I'll go with the theme of love, that you were going to find someone eventually.
Yeah.
To not stress, to not think that your person wasn't out there, and not to I don't know if sacrifice is the right word, but lower your standards because
Yeah.
you didn't think who you wanted to do life with existed. They exist. You just got to go on a few dates or even a lot of dates to
You got to
find
be
them.
patient. He's
You
going
got
to
to be patient.
come.
Yeah.
Okay. What's the essential part of your daily routine?
Coffee.
Oh, I got it. I'm a
mean,
French press girl. What do you do?
Oh, iced mochas. I won't drink anything else, but I've got my fancy machine to make the perfect iced mocha every single day.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I love it. Okay. And then my fourth question to you is the best advice you've ever received.
Doubt the doubts first.
Doubt the doubts first.
Yeah. Yeah. I learned that from a business coach probably only a few months ago. And it is the one piece of advice that keeps coming back for me. Part of it's being a business owner. I think that imposter syndrome pops up all the time, but it was really incredible to hear that thought of like, I doubt myself more than anyone else probably doubts me. So if I can doubt those doubts first, I actually get rid of those limiting beliefs or create more movement and opportunities for myself.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, you're never going to get to where you want to be in life if you're doubting yourself. You have to feel empowered and know who you are and know that you can do it. It's life's a mental game. It's all it is.
It's a huge
If you think you can do it, you can do it. If you think you can't, you're never going to get there. Like you might as well just say bye at the door, But Rachel, it was so nice to have you on. Thank you so much for coming on to Not Your Mama's podcast. If you guys want to get in contact with Rachel, all of her information is down below in the show notes. Do you have any last words before we say bye today?
I don't think so. Thank you for having me on and giving me the opportunity. And I'm always here to answer any of the relationship questions. I love this stuff.
Okay, perfect. Okay, guys. Well, thank you again for tuning in, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Not Your Mama's podcast. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you in the next one.